So let's just take a look at the process monitor to actually view these processes executing. So if I open up, all I need to do is go to Monitor and then Services and Process Console. And in here we have a full monitoring console. And in Active Processes, I just click on that, and you can see here that we've got a number of different processes that get called. In actual fact, what I'm going to do is go through and execute the API call now, because I want to show you that before I show you the monitor. So if we go into this, what I did was I created a JLL composite API, and what that does is very, very straightforward and fairly sequential. So it does a login to Edge, same approach, gets the token, passes through a property ID, which is actually something that if I just go over the properties here, I've just said that one of my input fields is going to be a property ID, and that's required. And we're going to output an Edge UID, a token, Dynamics account UID, an org ID, a DAS token, the SQL account ID, property name, and account name. There's quite a long list there, but what I'm really trying to illustrate through this is that we can, do one composite API that calls all these different services, does all this different execution, and then retrieves all of the information that needs to be sent back to the caller. So when we are in this, step here, we're passing through the information from the input. So in this case, we've got an auth token and the property ID. And then we're going to call the get account by ID. Same thing as the guide. It's exactly the same process. We're going to do an assignment of some of this information back to these output parameters. We're then going to log into Dynamics. We're going to then make a call to create the account. Then we're going to do some assignment again back to assign the response from Dynamics to the output that we want to send back to the caller, create the account in SQL Server, and then the final assignment is the account ID from SQL Server back to be displayed here as a SQL account ID. So all I do when I finish that, I've marked it as an anonymous, just so I'll show you here. It's an anonymous REST-based API, but I could uncheck that and start using basic auth by assigning names of users in informatica-cloud, or names of groups as well that I want to apply to. And that would apply. Basic authentication would have to be passed in the request. For the moment, I'm going to keep it anonymous, and I just hit publish. And when I do that, it's actually going to give me this service URL, you can see. And then I can just call that. Obviously, would normally call this via an application, but in this instance, I'm going to call it via my favorite REST client. I use Postman. You could use Advanced REST Client or SOAP UI or whatever it is that you prefer. And I'm going to call this initially without any parameters, and I'm doing that because I want to show that we've got automated structural validation of the request. So because I marked the property ID as a required parameter, it's automatically created me the correct JSON response here. So all I need to do is just paste in my property ID here. So if I just send that, when I click send, it's going to do all these different steps that we outlined in the process and then retrieve all the different IDs. So we can see if we run through these, we've got the third record in SQL Server, we've got a new GUID for the Dynamics account that got created, we've got an Edge token. This is the org ID again coming back from the Dynamics connection. We've got a new account name of Transwestern Commercial Services, property name Brickstone Square, and we've got the Edge UID as well for the organization, for the owner. So, quite a fine degree of control of exactly what is done in these processes and what we return. And if I just go into, let me just show you the records that got created first. So we go into Dynamics in Accounts, and we'll have another instance, I think, here of Transwestern. Yep, so we've got that second record that got created there. Obviously, you could, you could do an upsert using the API. It would just be a slightly different call than we've got at the moment. We've just got to create that's doing this at the moment. And then likewise, if I go into SQL Server and execute that again, we can see we've got this third record here that got created, and this time it was via the API. So let's have a look at the monitor in the process monitor. So we've got this composite API here. We're actually on version 2. So that means I've made edits, I've saved, and I've republished a new version of it. And when I open up the process detail, it actually opens up in this view where you can see a full breakdown of the execution that occurred. So if I just collapse this here, you'll see these different steps with a tick or a cross depending on which route we took. And you'll see here, for example, I've got at each stage it lists what the inputs and outputs were to each service call. So we logged into Edge, we got the token back, we then passed the token through to get the property information, then used the owner to get the organization, the account. Then we did some assignment, logged into Dynamics, and you can see here, actually this is of interest, so you can see here the full auth response that's coming back. Dynamics has its own way of doing authentication, which we'll cover in a bit. And then we're going to create the account in Dynamics, and so on and so on. I think we've gone through this process a number of times, so hopefully you get the idea now. The most important takeaway here is that it's the real flexibility behind this. It does not take long to set up processes like this. So just to prove that, what I want to do here is just make a quick edit to this. Let's say we wanted to make a change to our process. So what we're going to do is introduce a new branch here to say, well, if we don't get a login to Edge, so I'll do a data decision, and we're going to look at the Edge token that comes back. In actual fact, let me just check the output properties. I'll discard that. So we're going to get back this auth token and also this success parameter back from the call. So in the data decision, the easiest thing for me to do is just check whether success is set or not. So yes or no. If I click apply, it's going to branch off into 2 paths. So in the yes path, we know we've got a login, and in actual fact, what I can do then is just delete. I don't need any step. I can just continue processing. But in the example where we don't have a service token, what I'm actually going to do here is say, well, I'm going to return an error. So I'll look in my properties and just check. In my field section, I don't have an error defined, so I'm going to put an output field of error message here and save that. And then in my step, I'm going to say there's an assignment, and I'm going to assign to error message, and I'm just going to say Edge login failed, and that's going to be my message. And then I'm also going to end the process here. I'm going to do an end milestone. I'm going to say it's the end of the process, and I'm going to return a 401, unauthorized, which would be the appropriate status code for a situation like this. So now that I've done that, all I need to do is click Save, and I'm going to republish. Now, what I'm going to do now is, if we go into, let me see, so we go into the connections, and we're going to change in the API connections. I'm just going to change the username. So I'm going to put a 1 at the end of this, which would be incorrect. So I'll save that and then republish. And so what it's doing there is just republishing the metadata. And also I just need to republish the API that uses it. And this publishing, by the way, this publishing approach allows you to control very tightly exactly what gets pushed out when. So for example, if you had a new version of a service connector, that's not automatically going to be used by your processes unless you decide to consume that new version, and then you deploy that to production via this publishing method. So if I go into do the same thing again, I'm going to call the same API, but this time there will be an incorrect username and password. So you can see here that it's actually caused an issue. In actual fact, one thing I did forget to do is in my service connector, I just need to say that I want this action to continue processing even if it fails. So what we've seen there is actually this because of this fail on HTTP error issue. So if I just uncheck that, save, and then publish out, and then in my connection I need to publish the connection that consumes the service connector, and then I'm going to publish out the new version of the API, and I make the same call again. So you see here the error message is Edge login failed, and the status code is unauthorized. And that was completely controlled by the design of the API here. So if I then go into the monitoring console again, I'm just going to have to log back in here, and in the monitor we can see in the active processes we have another version of the API, one that faulted and then one that completed because we told it to continue processing even though the API call failed. And then if I open that up, you can see exactly the same call as we made before, but the difference here is that we've gone a different path. So the success actually, the login to Edge, we can see that it was a 401 and we didn't get an auth token back, and so we've declared that error message and then sent that as an output parameter.